In a major development that could affect thousands of homeowners and cost Cook County millions of dollars, a federal judge has ruled that the county is liable for serious violations in its long-running property tax sale system. On Monday, May 11, 2026, U.S. District Judge Matthew Kennelly issued his decision, finding that Cook County showed what he called deliberate indifference to constitutional problems in how it handled delinquent property taxes. This ruling comes more than 3 years after the U.S. Supreme Court struck down similar practices in another state, declaring them unconstitutional. 979-631. Let's break down how this system worked and why it became such a big issue. When Chicago area homeowners fell behind on their property taxes, Cook County would sell tax liens or tax certificates to private investors. These investors would then step in to cover the unpaid taxes. Homeowners were typically given a redemption period, around 2.5 to 3 years, to pay back the original debt plus interest, fees, and penalties. But here's where things got problematic for many families. If the homeowner couldn't catch up on payments during that time, the investor could petition the court and take full ownership of the property through a tax deed. Importantly, the investor could then keep any surplus equity, the difference between the home's market value and the total debt owed. In many cases, people lost homes worth tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars more than what they owed in back taxes. B112D. Since around 2020, nearly 2,500 homeowners in Cook County have lost their properties this way. Often, the original unpaid tax bills were relatively small, sometimes as little as a few $1,000s or even under $2,000. Yet the homes themselves had much higher values. Critics pointed out that these cases hit certain neighborhoods especially hard, including predominantly black communities like Roseland and Englewood on Chicago's South Side. This raised serious questions about fairness and the potential for widening the racial wealth gap. 72735C. Homeowners and community organizations filed a class action lawsuit arguing that this practice amounted to an unconstitutional taking of private property without just compensation, violating the Fifth Amendment. They also claimed it imposed excessive fines in violation of the Eighth Amendment. Judge Kennelly had already ruled in December of last year that the overall tax sale system itself was unconstitutional. Monday's decision takes it further by holding the county directly liable for damages. BD 9761. The county argued it shouldn't be held responsible because it didn't view the process as unconstitutional, and because private investors, not the county itself, were the ones profiting from the equity. But the judge rejected those defenses, noting that county officials had the data available and should have recognized the problems, especially after the Supreme Court's clear ruling in a similar Minnesota case. He described some of the county's testimony as inconsistent and said, officials failed to properly analyze the potential harm to residents. 7B0196. Now, the big question is money. How much could this cost taxpayers? Estimates vary, but we're talking potentially tens of millions of dollars, and in some projections even over $100 million depending on how many claims are validated. One analysis put the average equity loss per property at around $70,000. Judge Kennelly pushed back against the county's higher financial warnings, calling them overstated. He pointed out that these affected cases represent only about 0.02% of all homeowners in the county, suggesting an annual liability closer to $15 million or so. 6D39C0. Cook County Treasurer Maria Papa's office and other county officials have not issued detailed public comments on the latest ruling yet. Meanwhile, state lawmakers have been trying to reform the system. They passed measures to delay tax sales and are working on shifting toward models that better protect homeowners' equity, such as public auctions where surplus funds could be returned. However, full implementation is still in progress, and there's been pushback from tax buyer groups who participate in these sales. 1BD864. This case shines a spotlight on broader issues with property tax enforcement across Illinois, which remains one of the last states not fully aligned with the Supreme Court's guidance on returning surplus equity to original owners. For many families, losing a home over relatively small tax debts wasn't just financially devastating, it represented the loss of generational wealth, stability, and a place to raise their families. As this moves forward, we'll be watching closely to see how Cook County handles compensation for affected homeowners, what reforms actually get passed in Springfield, and whether this leads to meaningful changes that prevent similar situations in the future. It's a story that touches on government accountability, housing justice, and the real human impact of complex tax policies right here in our backyard.